know your worth, and then add some tax. We're the only women in the room, or maybe there's one other woman in the room. And so we walk in tentatively and we quietly take a seat, often not at the table, but in the edges. And we treat ourselves as guests in that room. Stop doing that immediately. Stop treating yourself as a guest and know that when you walking in that room is a catalyst. That room was different before you were in it. It is different because you're there. Can we do it then?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Influential Women Podcast. Here we empower, connect, and inspire women who are leading, creating, and redefining what is possible. I'm your host, Jodie O'Brien, and today we're joined by Sarah Burlew. She's the founder and CEO of Omlie, an award-winning management consulting firm that's challenging everything we think we know about how organizations should operate. Sarah walked away from a stable career to launch Omlie during the pandemic. Someone told her she didn't understand her market value, and she proved them wrong by hitting $1.9 million in revenue in 1 year. She's built a woman-owned firm that's earned a place on the Inc. 5000 list, has been recognized as a global top 100 inspiring workplace, and was named a most admired CEO, all while centering on joy, empathy, authenticity, and psychological safety as core business strategies. Today's conversation is about redefining work, betting on yourself when everyone doubts you, building a people-first culture at scale, and what it actually means to pioneer a different kind of leadership. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much. It got me even a little choked up as you're reading that. I'm inspired already to talk about this and help other women create their own path.
Well, I love that. And we're so glad to have you join us. Actually, reading that intro makes me think, I want to work for this woman. Like, what an accomplishment. You have had a successful career in consulting and healthcare. Walk us through how that shaped your career and tell us about the moment you knew that you had to leave and build something different.
Yeah, I think, I'm someone who has always, since I was a kid, thought entrepreneurs were rock stars because at their best, they're building something to solve a problem or to make something better. And I just was drawn to that like a moth to a flame. Like, how can I make people's lives better? How can I make things in my life better? And so, I've really ground myself in those kinds of problems and solutions. I spent most of my career in consulting where I saw that you can build really incredible strategies and plans, and then they struggle and fail, not because they were bad strategies, but because people weren't brought along on the journey to either understand where we're headed or why that vision matters, or how can I work better together with my peers to help enable that vision. And ultimately, I just felt like the biggest gap in the way we work were things like empathy and vulnerability and authenticity and joy. Like, gosh, it's rare to see the word joy when you're talking about work and business. And I felt like that was exactly what organizations were starved for, because like everything that's hard is just a little bit easier when you're having fun, or you can laugh through it, or you have friends that you truly trust and enjoy spending time with. And so for me, it was really grounded in this idea of my whole career was focused on human-centered design, building solutions for the people whose lives they were actually going to impact. And when I think about work and why it's not joyful, is because it was built like 175 years ago for making the Model T as efficient as possible. But we're knowledge workers, and like driving to that kind of efficiency doesn't make us more creative. It certainly doesn't make us more joyful. And so I felt like, while I always had this dream of creating something new, I wasn't sure what it was until I realized that the job that needed to be done was creating workplaces where people could be their authentic selves, like starting with myself. I think the break point for me was spending my days delivering messages from leaders above me that I didn't really believe in. That, I felt, especially in the pandemic, that middle manager layer, which was where I was sitting at the time, was being asked a lot. We were being asked to keep our companies alive and sustainable, and we were asked to keep our teams happy and connected. Like, no one was really helping us do those things. And I just felt like if I stayed where I was, I was at risk of my integrity and my health. And it was better to start from zero and say, how could I reimagine what a workforce would look like where I could just be my authentic self? And I reflect on all the moments in my career where I felt like I couldn't. I spent a decade of my career in the energy industry and was told I didn't have the right skills for that because I didn't have a power engineering degree. And I was like, well, I have all these soft skills, right? Don't those mean anything? I mean, they're soft, but I can, convey a message and I can tell a story and I can inspire people behind a vision. And it was like, yeah, but it'd be great if you had that power engineering degree. And I actually thought about it. I thought about going back to school for that degree, but it's something that I'm not excited or passionate about. And so it was this realization of how often I was asked to conceal or contort my strengths in hopes to get a seat at the table. And I was just tired of it. I was just tired of all that wasteful energy. And so Omlie started with my why of I just wanted to build a place where I could be my authentic self. And then by extension, everyone who worked at Omlie and then all of our clients, we would teach them how to do this too, how to be authentic and have joy and vulnerability in a way that, has been seen for a very long time as has no place in the business world.
That is so good. Like you said, it was those soft skills that kept the train on the rails during COVID. Some of those people who were leading were home, and maybe we were the ones that were still in the building wearing a mask and being shielded around by plastic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, totally.
And that was the moment, right? I mean,
Yeah.
leading up to that for me, I remember being told, oh, when you walk through the door, like leave your personal life at the door. And I always felt that there was a friction with that. Like, how is that possible? If you've got a sick family member or child or something really taxing and heavy weighing on you at home, how could you truly disconnect it? And then COVID happens and we're in each other's living rooms. So it's like there's no door you're walking through. We're just right here together. And it created an opportunity to marry those worlds in a way that I think for some of us, it emphasized what was broken. And for me, I just felt so compelled to fix it. I just couldn't operate in that environment anymore.
Well, I'm really interested in this. Someone told you that you didn't understand your market value while you were starting Omlie. I want to know if that was a positive comment or a negative comment, because in a lot of ways you could take it either way.
Mm-hmm. You could. And I think it probably depends on who you are and how you choose to hear it. So yes, before I had made the final decision to definitely leave to go to Omlie, I was entertaining a job offer. I had been partially doing this job within the parent company where I worked and was offered to take that position full time. And at the time I thought, chief strategy officer, like that is my dream job. I want to be setting strategy and figuring out what are these problems that I can solve. And less entrepreneurial, kind of in the safe umbrella of somebody else's organization. And I liked the gentleman that I was working for at the time. And he came to me and said, your skills are absolutely irreplaceable. Like no one can do this job the way you can, having sat in the different places of the business. Because I worked at the parent company, he knew my salary. And he said, your skills are so irreplaceable, but I really don't think you understand your market value. To take this job, it means a pay cut of about half your salary. And, I actually wasn't insulted when he said it, in part because I really respected him as a leader I'd been working with for a few months, and said, with all due respect, I'm pretty sure the definition of market value is what the market is paying. And this is what I've been paid for the last 3 years. And he was like, no, you don't get it. That's not how it works. Like I left money behind when I took a job. So you have to just accept that that's what happens. And, I really still seriously considered the job because I thought that chief strategy officer path was where I could make a bigger impact. And thankfully, one of my very best friends really counseled me through it and said, if this were truly your dream job, then it might be worth making that kind of investment if you saw, where it was going to get you or the job after that. But she was like, this isn't your dream job. This isn't the company that you want to drive ownership in. This isn't a place where you can truly be your authentic self. And so I turned that job down and ultimately left the organization about 3 months later. And I didn't see that as what he said as a negative. I actually saw it as fuel and a challenge. And I kind of reframed it to say, I don't understand my market value just means that I see a future that you can't see. And so when I set my very first goal for Omlie, I set my goal as $1 more than my my salary had been when I left. Because again, I'm a little competitive. So I was like, not only am I going to earn that salary, I'm going to earn just a little bit more. And was incredibly fortunate that, our message of a consulting firm that doesn't just bring you strategy, but actually brings you a trusting, engaged team resonated immediately in the market. And so we ended that first year like 4 or 5 times that salary goal. And actually, it turned out that he was right. I didn't know my market value. In fact, it was exponentially more than I thought it had been. And so I actually look back at it giggling now as like, that was a challenge, the way I interpret it as he threw it out there, and I smashed it.
Mhm.
So I felt really proud to do that. And especially, there are things that happen to you as an entrepreneur that I do think ignorance can be bliss. And it wasn't until the end of that first year that I found out that less than 2% of female-owned businesses ever in their entire lifetime earn more than $1 million a year. And so for us to end so close to 2 million, someone shared that with me at the end of the year. And I was like, thank goodness I didn't know that, because I probably would have set my sights lower. But instead I was just like, let's see where this will take us.
That's amazing. And to take, like we were saying, is it a negative or is it a positive? You took that negative comment and really turned it into a positive. And I think that's the thing, right? We as women don't realize that these soft skills that we possess, empathy, the ability to communicate in a way that maybe men can't. I mean, there's so many things that we're able to do well that they're not necessarily appreciated in the marketplace. And when you look at like a C-suite job, that's what needs to be valued, or at least that's what we hope will be valued. And so, what would you say to women who are struggling with that, their value, who are maybe conceding and taking less, who are offered a job that they know that other people are making way more than they are, and they have that temptation to concede?
Yeah. My thing I tell my team all the time is know your worth and then add some tax. Because one of the hardest things to do, especially for us in consulting, because you're putting a dollar amount on your time and expertise. So it's hard to say, like, yes, I'm worth a premium. You absolutely are. And you should charge a little bit more than that, because that extra premium and valuing who you are and the intelligence that you bring, the curious questions that you ask, the experience that you have before, kind of embodying this idea of I know my worth and I'm adding tax. To me, another way to think about it is often, especially as women, we're the only women in the room, or maybe there's one other woman in the room. And so we walk in tentatively and we quietly take a seat, often not at the table, but in the edges. And we treat ourselves as guests in that room. Stop doing that immediately. Stop treating yourself as a guest and know that when you walking in that room is a catalyst. That room was different before you were in it. It is different because you're there. And so kind of embodying this mindset of like, I have a right to be here. I'm going to add value just by being here, even if you say nothing, and like really taking the power away from someone else. Him trying to set my market value, I could have listened and accepted that as truth, but that would have meant I believed him more than I believed in myself. So like really trusting our gut and our intuition, I think is critical for us as women. And then I think, the answer to every question you don't ask is no. So in that discussion, when I went back to him and turned down that job offer, I told him what I was going to do. I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to start a consulting company. I have specific things that I want to do. And I'm really sorry that I'm leaving you with some of these projects unfinished, but this is what I need to do for myself. And he was actually one of our first clients because he realized how irreplaceable that expertise was. And one of our first projects was me continuing and finishing off that work with him, which was a bold thing to ask, to say, thank you for this job. I'm not accepting it, but I'll do it anyway at a higher price. And he was in a position that he needed that expertise so badly. So it was a great validation of knowing my worth and adding some tax on top of it.
Yeah, he absolutely was talking out of both sides of his mouth when he was like, your skills are irreplaceable, but
Yes.
your worth is so much lower. Like, get it together.
Right,
Well,
right.
you walked away from a major client that
Mhm.
wasn't aligned with your values, even though it did cost you significant revenue early on. So, what did that decision teach you about building your business?
Yes. So that was about 2, maybe 3 years into business. We had a client that represented a significant amount of our revenue. I think it was like 17 to 20% of our revenue at the time. And we had observed they had been acquired and we were starting to see some changes in their corporate culture. And so we had already made a plan closing out the prior year that we had a contract with them through Q1 and that we were not going to continue after Q1. As we were moving into the year, they also stopped paying their vendors. And we had a process in place to have conversations with them about that. And then the client just stopped taking our calls, responding to calls, emails, text messages, nothing. And so we said, unfortunately, our process at this point is we have to stop working. We're not going to keep working and digging ourselves further into this revenue hole. And that was a really deliberate decision that we made as a leadership team. We felt like they were not a values aligned company anymore. And if we were building a values based company, we could not build that on top of toxic relationships or people that didn't respect our team. And it was really scary. There was short-term fear, a lot of spreadsheeting, a lot of sandboxing and forecasting, and a lot of honest conversations with our team about the financial hit that we expected, why we were making that decision. In the medium term, we ended up being incredibly fortunate and validated in that decision. As we told them we were stopping work, one of the particular clients, the most toxic, retaliated and said, well, fine, I'm just going to cancel your contract, which again was fine with us. We knew that was a risk that we were stopping work. We expected we wouldn't finish it. But what was really interesting that happened is several other vendors called us and admitted that they also hadn't been being paid. And we're like, we didn't know. We didn't know we could just stop working. And our chief growth officer said, well, our business strategy is not to work for free. That's not like how we think about business. And so it became this really interesting case study, not just for our team to see that, hey, we have a set of values that we live by and decide by, but also that we proved to all these other vendors that they didn't have to put up with this crap either.
Mhm.
And, I really believe that when you do the right thing, not always immediately, but eventually that will pay off. And we were really fortunate actually that within that same quarter, we landed a brand new client, a huge piece of business. They were trying to change a process in their system that every pharma company uses, but wanted to make it more human. And so we talked about how you could bring joy to a process that everybody hates. And we won that work. We won it over an incumbent consultancy and we won it over McKinsey. And they told us when they gave us the definition was because we were the only people that didn't talk about the technology, but talked about the people who had to use the technology and navigate the process. And at every subsequent client meeting, they introduced me as Sarah Warm Hug Burlew because they said, we felt like we got a warm hug from your team in that pitch. And we knew that the process was terrible, but it was the people who had to make it successful. And so, making that decision was really tough. It was remarkable for it to be completely backfilled by a new client in the time that it had. And really that decision taught me that boundaries can be a growth strategy, not just like a moral or personal preference. I think it's something we don't do or say plainly enough as women, but ultimately, like saying no to a misaligned dollar creates space for the right opportunities, the right clients, and to your point, the right people who want to work on our team because they see that we're going to look out for them too. It's not just the dollar that we're chasing.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. Well, the elephant in the room is really what is Omlie? I know that you named your firm after Phoebe Omlie, a female
Mhm.
aviation pioneer, and have your team choose pioneers to honor on your walls. But tell us a little bit about the company and what exactly it is.
Yes. And the name Omlie, I feel like there's something magical about a name when you choose the right one. And I knew with the company, I wanted to embody this energy of a pioneer. For us, a pioneer is someone who builds or creates something new and creates a path for others to follow. So it's not just about the entrepreneurial creation side, but how are you creating a path that now others can rise and live in the same values? And I honestly probably would have started the company sooner had I had a name that I loved. It was one of those moments where you have a really terrible day at work and you can't sleep. And it was 3 a.m. and I was lying on the couch Googling female pioneers when I finally came across Phoebe after months of searching. And I loved her resilience, her resourcefulness, and that she really embodied the spirit of a female pioneer. for anybody who's thinking about starting a business, she also was relatively lost to history. So she was trademarkable, which made that really an interesting win for us. But her spirit and that pioneering spirit is something we use to filter every person we hire, every client that we accept, every project that we take on, because we want to be the people that are changing, not just the way we work, the work we do, and how we impact those around us. And so today, Omlie is really focused in healthcare, wellness, and plant-based medicines and helping those organizations pioneer, whether that's new products or new ways of working. One of our actually very first projects as a new company, we were invited to help build the strategy to bring the COVID vaccine to market. Subsequently, the antiviral. We launched a lot of rare disease and oncology strategies for our clients while also building really high trust, high performing, engaged, joyful teams.
You're winning major transformational work while leading with authenticity and clear values in an industry that doesn't usually do that. So, how do you maintain who you are while also scaling?
Whew, that is a great question, and one I'm honestly still learning, trialing, getting right, failing, trying again. I think when I think about how a lot of the people I have interacted with in business, I feel like they move through their decisions through the lenses of fear and scarcity. I can't operate in that world. It's just not natural to me. So I like to think that I move as a leader through purpose and joy. Now, that's not to say that there are some days where I'm like white knuckling my chair, purpose and joy, like trying to keep myself in that headspace. But one of my favorite things to think about, a mentor told me years ago, actually, she asked me what my favorite flavor of ice cream is. I'm curious, Jodie, what's your favorite
Oh
flavor
my
of ice
goodness,
cream?
I love mint chocolate chip. I just made the most amazing fudgy dessert with mint chocolate chip ice cream. It's my
Okay.
favorite. What about yours?
That'll have to be part of the takeaways. I like all ice cream except coffee. Coffee is the only thing I don't like in ice cream because I don't
Really?
actually like coffee to drink either. But ice cream is one of my favorite things. And I asked that question because a mentor said to me once, "You will never be everyone's favorite flavor of ice cream."
Mm.
And because I'm such an ice cream lover, it really resonated with me. And so I basically have made peace with the fact that like Omlie is not for everyone. Leading with values costs me some opportunities. That's a price I'm willing to pay because we're not for everybody and everybody's not for us. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, especially when you're starting out, to not just chase every dollar and figure out how you can always make the math work, but instead really keep centering myself on this idea of like fear and scarcity are constructs that I don't operate within. I know there's plenty of pie. I know the business world is big enough. And that's why I think about purpose and joy being something that drives me forward. And to stay in that headspace, I surround myself with a leadership team that tells me the truth, not just what I want to hear. They encourage me to recalibrate and rest, not just always push, protect the time and space that we have. But it really, when you keep things visible, you mentioned the pioneers that we all have at Omlie. Our office is in an old Victorian house. So walking up the stairs are all these like family portraits of our pioneers. And we do that intentionally because when you're tired and when it's hard, and really when winning that contract would make a big difference, even though you don't think it's the right environment for your team, that's when it's hardest to make the choice. But that's when it matters most to choose integrity over convenience. And so, like having mantras for yourself, purpose and joy, having a team that supports you in those decisions and helps you navigate through those difficult moments is absolutely critically important. Fundamentally, I just think it's about seeing business differently. And this idea of fear and scarcity is just not one I want to live my life through a lens of.
So, what do you want to build for the women leaders who are coming after you? What legacy do you hope Omni creates?
Oh, that's a heavy one too. I think when I think about even how far we've come as women, there's so much work still yet to be done, and yet we have come really far. It was 1988. It was just after my seventh birthday when it was the first time that women could take out a business loan without a male cosigner. And we're fortunate we've never needed funding. We've bootstrapped our whole business. But gosh, can you imagine all of the businesses that never happened? That never happened because women didn't have access to that kind of support. So I hope that future women leaders end up kind of taking that for granted. Like all the things that we've had to fight for psychological safety and flexibility, to be seen as not just the default note taker and laborer in the room, but strategic by default, not by exception. I think all of those are things that, when we think about our policies and processes at Omlie, we're intentionally trying to rewrite all the wrongs that we face in the workplace. And for us, it's a really interesting catch-22 because a lot of our team members have never experienced some of those wrongs, which is wonderful. It's tough because they don't always appreciate the path that we're on and how different it is. But to me, that's a future state, like a legacy where people that have worked with Omlie or our team members, whether they're here or they've left, for them to be able to say, like, working with Omlie changed how I lead and what I will no longer tolerate. Like that would be like, it makes me emotional even thinking about it, because like that's a world where our organizations operate for the people that work within them versus against the people that work within them.
What would you say to those women who truly don't know their worth, who've been told that they're small, who've been told that they can't do it on their own, and who are struggling to find joy in their current positions?
I think it's really easy to take other people's viewpoints as truth, but I deeply believe when others can't control you, they can try to control what others think about you. And if you let them control what you think about you, what you're telling yourself is that you trust someone else more than yourself. Like that is a power you should not give away. And someone else's assessment of your worth, that's not truth. That's not a prophecy in any way. It's a reflection of their limitations, of their imagination. And so I think it's like, thank you. I'm not taking that on board. People often joke the old phrase of feedback is a gift. I mean, there are plenty of gifts I've received that I have returned. So think about it that way. Like, which of those really will strengthen you, which can fuel you as a challenge, and which are you just not taking on board because it's not in service of you to trust someone else over yourself.
So good. Sarah, it has been such a wonderful honor to talk with you today. I mean, just to think about doing something different after the pandemic and building such a huge, amazing consulting firm really on your own. And you're in a Victorian house lined with portraits going up the stairs. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And you just really are somebody who can really inspire our audience. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. It's very surreal. I think I've always, again, thought entrepreneurs were rock stars. I've dreamed, we hit the Inc. 5000 list last year. I dreamed of that before I had the dream of Omlie. It's really strange and surreal to be sitting where I am. And so I think the other message I would say was it's possible. It's possible for all of us. Just think about, people think of entrepreneurs as risk takers. When I first started the business, people would always say, it's so brave. It's so brave. And in my head, I always heard it with a question mark. I always heard brave. Like, I'm not sure yet. And I think, my challenge to others would be, I don't resonate with the idea of being a risk taker. I think I'm a calculated risk taker and I de-risk my decisions as much as possible. And so if you're afraid to take that first big, bold step, don't take a small, less scary one that gives you some evidence so that you have the confidence to take the very next step.
Oh my gosh, so good. Well, here at Influential Women, of course, we're trying to inspire women who are leading, creating, and redefining what's possible. Today, I've been your host, Jodie O'Brien, and I'm so glad that you joined us. Until next time.
Can we do it?